Listen to me. When you walk in a room, your smile ought to be bigger than everybody else's. You say, Ron, sometimes I don't feel like smiling. I don't care. When you walk into a room, your smile ought to be bigger than everybody else's. When you walk in a room, that room ought to say, man, Travis is here. Hot dog, it's on. Somebody ought to say that about you. And then they ought to say, why is it like that about you? Folks, when Christians work, it ought to be harder work than anybody else in that room. If you work in a factory, praise God for it, but you ought to be the hardest worker in there. If you're making sandwiches, you ought to be the fastest sandwich maker there is. If you're teaching children, you ought to dedicate more and more time to making sure that lesson's awesome. Even if you have to fight the federal government, just fight them and get in there and work hard. Folks, whatever it is, you know what Jerry Falwell used to say? He used to say, if it's Christian, it ought to be better. If it's Christian, it ought to be better. What does that mean? That means everything you do with your children, for your wife, for your family, in your job, everywhere you walk, should be better because you've been there. Folks, if it's witnessing, you ought to be the strongest witness there is. You ought to be the strongest witness there is. Oh, it gets fun after a while when the people keep coming against you. It gets fun after a while. At first it hurts your feelings, but after that you're like, praise God, I must be doing something right. Just witness and witness hard. If you're in service, if you're serving people, serve people unlike any other entity out there. Folks, there's all kinds of stuff out there. There's a Peace Corps. You can go all over the world and there are all kinds of non-Christian organizations that are serving people. Christian organizations ought to be the ones that blow people's minds. They ought to say, it doesn't make any sense. How can it be? How can it possibly be that they're doing all of this for us? And then you can tell them about your heart. Folks, give God your best for the longest, and He'll give you His best forever. You want to give Him His best? Why should God give me His best when I won't give Him my best? A lot of people think that's a free ride. A lot of people think just because you're a Christian, that's it. It's just going to flow on you. Your pockets are going to swell. Your wallet's going to swell. You're going to have 3 cars. Your house is going to be paid for. Not only is it going to be paid for, but it's going to be huge. You're going to have all that stuff. Folks, it's just baloney. Don't believe that garbage. Don't believe it. What you've got to believe is God's going to give you what you put in. He's going to give you, and then He is a God that can perform the miraculous. He's going to give you that little more for what you put into it. And Jesus comes in there and performs the miraculous. Then He brings the best wine out last. He brings the best wine out last. Do you know something, folks? Right now, He wants to turn your water into wine. He wants to turn my water into wine. You say, Ryan, you're over-spiritualizing this. Well, that may be possibly true. It may be just about a miracle, and that's all it is. But, folks, what I know is sometimes I am absolutely watered down. Sometimes I'm absolutely diluted. I've had all I could take that day. I've had all I could take that day. The world's beat me up. It's beat me up more than you could ever believe. And I walk in there and I'm just watered down. And I come through there. And if I go to Christ and I say, Christ, I realize that you sustain me, you build me, you fill me, you give me all of this. Then all of a sudden, folks, all He has to do is change my water into wine. All He has to do is say, Ryan, I'm right there with you, and I'm going to turn that water into wine. You say, God, my marriage is watered down. We love each other. We care for one another. I don't know what the deal is. It just doesn't seem the same. Folks, He can turn water into wine. You say, God, my finances are in trouble. I don't know what to do. Folks, my Bible study's in trouble. My Bible study's watered down. My time with you is watered down. I don't feel as close to you. He says, that's what I needed to hear. That's what I needed to hear. Devotion. Folks, right now, what I want you to do, because what I'm going to do in 2011 is I'm going to give God my very best, more than I ever have before. I'm going to give Him all I've got, because when I do that, then I can go to Him for the miraculous. He's going to bring the mysterious. He's going to bring the miraculous. But folks, He's going to make it obvious to everybody around you that He's blessing you. He's going to make it obvious all around you that your ministry, whatever you're doing for Him, is going to be blessed if you're working your tail off and you're praying your tail off. They go hand in hand. 2011 is about you deciding what you're going to do for God, and you go do it. If you're sitting still and you're doing nothing, you're in sin. Go do something for God. Let Him turn your water into wine. Somebody pray for me.